truth and preservation of our soul shine. I can feel it, yours and mine. Close your eyes and witness it inside. In your bones, you will know. Trust and let go, and let it flow.
Welcome to another episode of All Things in the Name of Love. And today I have with me a soul brother that I met, I think, on Instagram, and what you share resonated so deeply with my soul and how we get to show up in the world. And I know you're a multi-dimensional, multifaceted being of light. And we've been trying to do this for the past couple months, and I'm so grateful today is the aligned day to do it. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. And I welcome you and appreciate you. And I
Thank
forgot
you, Sophia.
Oliver.
Oh yeah, that's my name. Yeah, you
You,
might need to
yeah,
know that.
like this guy I'm talking to that I didn't introduce, Oliver
Yeah.
Jenkins.
My light precedes me. No introduction needed, clearly.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And tell me a little bit about your spiritual journey.
So, my spiritual journey, I guess, I think all of our spiritual journey begins when we're quite young. And I think that I became quite aware of a distinction between what I felt and how the world was kind of running around me when I I think I was 5 years old in the grocery store or the supermarket, depending on where you're from in the world, holding my mum's hand, and immediately I just sort of I guess I noticed a sort of haze in people as they sort of walked around, and it didn't really seem there, and the world seemed almost painted on or copy and pasted on what I was kind of feeling was real. I remember this very distinctly, and I asked my mum, "Where do people go who don't want to be part of this?" And she said, "There isn't anywhere." And I can to this day, and I've talked to my mum about this, remember this sort of hesitancy in her voice because I felt that she felt what I was asking her, but at the same time maybe a level of embarrassment for not really being able to give an appropriate answer. So I really think that from that day I was kind of aware, well, this is a bit skew if this is a bit off kilter, it's kind of, off key.
Mhm.
And then, you go through the whole school loop. And by that point, I'd gone to university when I was about 19. And I was in the library one day on YouTube, which is a relatively new thing then. That was 2008. So this was around the time of the whole financial crisis. And I was in London at university too. So popping my head into all sorts of different subcultures and also partying quite a lot too. And I suppose using drugs as well, which kind of did have an effect on them. And also the social circles, both positive and negative, that I was interacting with and different counterculture movements. Anyway, a video popped up about the banking system, and I just sort of went full bore into that and the alternative narratives around power structures and the way that the world is sort of organized. And I think for a period of about a year, I mean, I really purged a lot of the worldviews that I'd inherited, through history class. I was studying anthropology as well. So that was quite a fruitful but difficult process. And that's quite, I think there's parallels to this time now. It's even worse where information is so readily available with a high level of censorship to really angle a person's mindset in their own existential isolation. And I think that really did that to me. So I really, my family thought I was kind of crazy. And then I kind of just quit uni because I figured, I am this kind of guy. I go full bore once I've reached the logical conclusion. I'm like, well, there's no point in me doing that because I'm never going to be able to see myself in any of those worlds.
Right.
Um, and I got a job as a waiter, which was perfect for me because you're kind of having that rapidity of human interaction and also working part of a team. I was also quite overweight at that period, so I was dealing with like a lot of self-esteem and addressing my health and my fitness. And through that journey of alternative narrative, naturally you start to encounter things which start to express a more energetic understanding of our world. And that eventually led me to spirituality and meditation, and almost like a kaleidoscopic fractality to my journey started to unfold, where I became connected with different realizations or different feelings that I'd had in my life and in my own sensory experience up until that point.
Mhm.
And then one day I was just sort of dozing off to bed and I was like, well, just breathe. And I was like, oh, woke up the next day, I was like, that must be meditation. And that really started to add a sort of counter axis to that insurge of information about, I guess you could say, the dark, or however you would like to interpret that, really, to give me more agency and sort of self-efficacy about how I could become a part of creation, I guess, really is the easiest way to put it. And I think that so by the time I was 22, I was a parent with my sort of first partner, and we had two children, and that relationship subsequently broke down. That was also an incredibly difficult time. And during that time, I'd also tried to slot in working different jobs in schools, especially supporting students with autism and learning quite a lot. And randomly one day just saw somebody advertising a Reiki treatment, went for one, great, went for the second, scared the absolute crap out of me because I think it sort of touched a point of my essence that was clearly beyond my control. And you sort of have these initiatory gates as you go through that process too, where more and more it seems to be that redefinition of sacrifice is more about what you know or what you think you know of yourself. You kind of have to leave that at the foot of the mountain to be able to enjoy that pendulating ride that we all love to go on. And it was about 6 months after that second treatment that I went back to train, and I'm really appreciative of the lady that I trained with and the group that I did, because it was a weekly thing, and it was nice and low and slow. And in that process, that relationship, although we weren't married, it was kind of like a marriage breakdown, and all these different things sort of started to fade away and reframe externally and internally. And then it was different initiations. So like a close friend's bereavement, that relationship breaking down, and then meeting my current partner, my wife now, over what seemed like a very synchronistic period of all these different things, us kind of meeting together, and then really doing the work that we've done for nearly the past decade, and having she has two children from a previous relationship and we have two together. So all of those initiations, not only of having more children, but blending a split family, all of those different hereditary traditions, and really becoming our own little, self-sustaining unit, which is, to be honest, quite a lot of energy when we all get together, which is very regularly, because we all sort of initiate different gates and different aspects in each other. So it's pretty crazy to sort of be at this point in my life where I can honestly say that schism of division between the material and the spiritual is something which I feel quite at peace with, in the sense that that is something which is so alien for I think any organic organism or consciousness to really sort of transplant into their mentality, and especially their biology, that there is even a division there. And I think that subsequently, especially as I'm only 36, so, especially as a man, you clearly don't grow up anywhere before 35, regardless of your life circumstances, I don't think.
Mhm.
That immersion, or even dissension into matter, the physical, and the body, and relationship, as this expression of not only your spiritual connection, but really of a sense of mission here, especially during those times. So I think I was definitely quite impacted by quite a lot of like those 90s films where there's this very messianic kind of programming, especially like Terminator 2 with John Connor. So like that always like really struck out with me, like so much in my imagination, and in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way, I
Yeah.
kind of consider myself that character, just doing it through giving people meditations and giving them experience of themselves, and kind of, I guess, an easy way to define it would be to help them de-grid out of that synthetic overlay, I guess. And that's something that I think I'm always trying to do, but I think I've become softer in it, in as much as you could say that's all evil and dark and orchestrated. And I think on one level it is, but then it's the perfect mechanism of reality in the sense that it's mirroring back to us individually and collectively that we are the dreamers, we are the projectors. We're not just a canvas to be projected onto,
Right.
So yeah, I see it very much um,
Mhm.
as an immersive experience. And also, I think more and more my spiritual journey has become about the art of relating, the art of being able to have that ability to descend into your own matter, your own matrix, your own um, that kind of manifested Sophia kind of Gnostic energy that we all carry within the actual what we're here for. My one of my youngest daughter, Ren, I can't remember what we're talking about at the dinner table between all of us. I think it was the Matrix, and somebody mentioned Morpheus. And out of nowhere, Ren slammed her fist down on the table. She's only 7. She's like, there is no simulation. And no one had mentioned simulation. She says, there is no simulation. This is all real and we need to claim it. It was the most bizarre thing. But that, I think, in a nutshell, is what I would say. We're supposed to be here and supposed to be enjoying ourselves. And hopefully you get from my words, I feel very passionate about that.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a thing because like we've been programmed not to be in the experience, right? Like that's one of the wounds that we carry. I mean, I'm just it just popped in my head. Medieval paintings of humans are so not human because they were so disconnected from the body. Like, okay, I'm just going to be doing, and that's a whole other narrative that we can talk about, but I don't think we need to, about Tortara and how our history has been erased.
Hmm.
But like what we've been taught now is that there was a massive separation between the body and the spirit. And so the body, which is our temple that we chose to come in to experience, was neglected. And I think part of that visceral experience is the tangibility of being in this density. Like, what does it feel like? Yesterday I had a croissant and I was just like a 5-year-old eating it because I wanted to fully enjoy it because I don't usually eat croissants. So it was like this beautiful chocolate croissant experience and getting the flakes all over the place. And I didn't care because I was fully in that moment. And that I think is part of that space of, yes, this is a reality. How do we choose to experience it? Do we choose to disconnect or do we choose to like fully embody the experience so we can experience it?
Yeah, 100%. I think, those like what you're talking about in terms of like lost history as well. The archetypes that we're given are these sort of very removed aesthetic ideas of success where you're somehow imprinting your will upon the realm. And I think it's very damaging. And I think there's a lot of like Puritan sort of subconscious hangover where there's this real dislocation where, like you're saying with the croissant, like when we trust our desire as well as the fountainhead of that expression, somehow we find this alignment and this harmony with this kind of divine will coming through us too. And there's this real, yeah, dislocation would be the word. And you see people try and play catch up with that feeling of not being welcome in so many like larger life decisions, but also in these very almost violent micro expressions that they have with themselves and also the people and especially the earth that they relate with. It's quite confused, and equally I don't think it's um, reserved for any kind of Western interpretation because you kind of see this. You can find evidence of this in all sorts of indigenous cultures and traditions that there's been obviously been some massive traumatic or, many traumatic shocks and shudders and like challenges to trust between how we find ourselves to be and how we can kind of operate within the world. But the thing that's always seemed to have made the difference is that um, alignment with this larger part of yourself. You imagine if it's easy for us to have this conversation, and obviously to many it would seem absolutely bafflingly crazy, but if it's one thing to have a concept of your soul. It's another thing to have a sensory experience because once you've got that sensory experience, you're kind of locked in, right? You can't mess around. No one can take that from you.
Right.
And suddenly your hierarchy of needs completely changes. Yes, you have to live in the day to day, but you really start to understand that the legacy is temporal and it's much bigger than you. And that's can be disorienting, but it can also be a comfort. And we live in between this sort of pendulation all the time.
I feel that so deeply because, there's the small me, right? The one that wants to control and think I'm just this three-dimensional construct, but I feel so much greater. And when I'm guided, like I am with this podcast, I'm guided to do a podcast because it's not about me, right? It's about what flows through us. And when we surrender to that greater sense of self, that I am presence, that we are expressing itself through us, um, it's a relief because that small self-doubt self that comes through doesn't matter. It's that deeper, oh, this is like the divine guidance I'm getting that's coming through me. And yes, it is through me, this vessel, but this vessel is just that expression through which the divine wishes to come through.
Yeah, and one thing, hands up, and being completely honest, I omitted, which is hilarious to me, is that when I was sat at the computer looking at that video, the first one that came up was one about flat Earth, and I was like, that's too fucking crazy for me. So I jumped to that banking thing, right? And then fast forward the sort of autumn before I met my wife, with my some of my friends, and some of those have faded away now. And I was kind of picking that topic back up, and I'm very much, even in the way that I approach my work and my sort of spirituality, as much as it's very heart-centered, it's also very architectural and
Mm.
technical in the sense that it has to sort of map. And going through that journey and stood on the edge of a cliff, seeing the horizon, and it's not so much about the Earth being flat, that's not really the point. It's more about the same as the history, the cosmology of the reflection and the blueprint and the majesty. And I just sort of realized it in a moment as it all washed upon me. And I was like surrounded by people who were kind of like laughing at me. I was like, oh my God, like crying.
Mm.
Like it's just God. It's just God. God is real. Like we're loved, we're here, and it's all made. And then that was kind of like a real initiation in the sense of, oh my God, I don't have to carry this burden of trying to force myself through this schism hole that's going to kind of allow me to access this, to understand that actually it's such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful realm to be in, and that the design of it is such that you can literally feel that communion in eating a chocolate croissant, and it's quite bizarre because it's the antithesis of anything that you're taught. And I
Oh yeah.
went to like Christian education, and so and always kind of dug what was being said when it was about Jesus's word, but also kind of feeling like, well, this guy telling me about it, he doesn't feel a match for that kind of message. So this is just like kind of strange.
Mm.
Um, It's kind of pretty interesting to see people kind of go through these awakenings and sort of discover different stuff. And also, I suppose, over the years, with that kind of alternative truth movement, which has all of its pitfalls as well, I sort of understand it now that there is this sort of collective labor share that not everybody has necessarily the life organization to be able to handle such trippy concepts, and equally, not everybody has the stomach for it, just as maybe somebody might not be able to do the sort of more administrative aspects of, say, for example, working in a relief center or something like that. We're all kind of being hopefully called to this very unique sphere of genius where there's this sense of like melody and rapport almost. I mean, that's what I feel when I do what I love, or when I'm doing what I love, is that it's really kind of adding to that great positive record in the sky. And I think something that I'm quite proud of in my work, and especially the work I do with my wife as well, is this kind of welcoming of your ego self in a real positive way, like not trying to constantly battle that or diminish it, but actually, it's actually wonderful that you're Sophia with all of these different permutations and accumulation of choices and all these different things. Like, why would I want to constantly see past that and not bring reverence to that? Because
Mm.
that's just dumb,
Yeah.
really.
No,
Yeah.
I love that because like I know the multidimensionality of me. I laugh that I have a BMW and I love Kuan Yin. Like it's just part of who I am. And yet they're all me. And so the breadth of what wants to be expressed, it just delights me. And I'm I get multiple lives, I get past lives, I get all these different things. I get it. And in this experience of the me that wants to be, I delight in what brings me joy. And my favorite word, and how do I describe myself, is delightful. Because that's a state that, like the wonder of beingness, right? When we allow ourselves the wonder of beingness, that's when we feel the divine flow, right? When we're in the when they're in that space of like, I mean, it's all good. I mean, shame and guilt and everything is all good because it's part of us. But like when we're in that state of being aware of the feelings and allowing ourselves to feel them fully, that's the experience that I think drives us into that deeper understanding of what and who we are.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree. And equally, in the last sort of something that was probably very different to when I started, because you kind of you get a bit hocus pocusy at the beginning of your spiritual journey because it's like going into a sweet shop and that you're gravitating to one thing, next thing, next thing,
Mhm.
next thing. And I joke that people try to play spiritual top trumps, like, do you know about this? Oh, and I know this. And it's just like it becomes its own little ego echo
Yeah.
chamber as well. And I think a lot of people probably gone through that process. And in terms of intuition and alignment, it definitely feels more and more incumbent actually to stay present with me and my body as I am here
Mhm.
now. And for me, I feel like you were mentioning grid work and the work that you've been doing before we hit record is that when I do stuff like that, I think when I started, I would have been like trying to connect to all the energies, but now it's very much like, okay, what is that sense of that, but also how does that mirror to me as a sort of cellular expression of that drama, and
Yeah.
where am I meandering and where can I kind of tilt the sail just a little bit, add to that kind of matrix of events I don't know if positive is the right word, but whatever I would consider to be positive seems to be life enabling or expression enabling. That seems to be the way that I gauge it, or that's
Mm.
that's my vibe.
I feel, and I've had this experience a couple times where I've been in a situation where I feel the energy of the room. And I've heard tap into your Merkaba, which we all have, and then send out your which I always do anyways because I'm connected with it, but it was a conscious thing the first time I heard it. And it was I send out a toroidal field of unconditional love to everyone in this room. And that way I'm like doing the work, but I'm still present with my experience without having to take on the energy of anyone else.
Hmm.
And so that's what I do when I'm doing the grid work is I'm just making sure that I'm still not taking on anyone else's energy, and when I do I clear it, and then sending love out because that's what I'm here for is the love. So and it's just a different, it's a frequency. Like if it affects somebody, great. If it doesn't, that's great. I know I had people smile when I was just eating my croissant yesterday. Like, wow, she's really enjoying it. Like, yeah, but like it's how I show up in the world and how anyone shows up in the world. I'm not special. I'm just like aware, and that's what I've been shown is how I'm doing the grid work. Is like my beingness is the grid work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you get quite kind of swept up in those early days into the idea, kind of fallacy of being of service, and it's kind of it can become its own trap in the sense that, it leaves seen a mass amount of like energy worker kind of burnout over the years, possibly in myself and others that I've obviously worked with.
Hmm.
And I don't think that is really necessary. But one thing I would kind of like to mention, I suppose, in myself as well, has become more easy for me to understand. I think there's a kind of false pressure, sort of exacerbated by social media, that you have to be this self-contained unit. And that's true up until a point. But I definitely know that I don't know enough to know me without other people. And I'm sure it's the same for others. And I'm quite excited about this next period, especially in the kind of first real visceral pierce of that illusion bubble that was kind of COVID for people, where it's like, oh my God, this this is what can happen if we just let shit
Yeah,
roll.
yeah,
That people are like, oh my God, we actually kind of do need each other in this sense of being able to connect and relate and cross-pollinate in those ideas, but obviously also within your own field, within your own hormonal system and robustness. And I think one of the things that we see as a common trait is a kind of a relational burnout in
hmm,
individuals who are quite sensitive. Even if they're surrounded by people, the kind of mechanisms and base gears in which they're relating with people and clocking into different energies just have tired them out, or equally, they're incredibly lonely, which, I think is something that sort of permeates the motives of my work in the sense that I know a lot of people are in, well, I know that a lot of people are in a lot of situations where a meditation or a YouTube video from myself or others is just enough to kind of give them that reflection, that call and return to be like, oh my God, I'm not the only one sort of having these thoughts. And it's not
yeah,
like they're having crazy thoughts or they need to be
right.
assured of what they think
Hmm.
about the world, but really what they feel, and the deepness of their heart. Because I think that critical mass of people that can feel and not only feel but share and relate how they feel and then kind of make it manifold is really not that far away in a lot of environments, a lot of countries, a lot of cultures and societies. It's not as dire, I think, as many would have us believe.
Yeah, and it's that's intentional. Like we don't want to share the connections because if they connect, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like we're just going to remember ourselves. And um yeah, the interrelativity, I can break it down even further because I do animal communication and healing. And so one of the dogs I'm living with right now is an amazing reflection for me. He's shown me aspects of myself that I didn't know I got triggered by. And I haven't been triggered by in like 20 years. because my dad died, and he was the last person that showed up the way this dog is showing up for me. And I'm like, what a gift to be able to notice like everything in life is here for us as a reflection, as a way to see aspects of ourselves that we might not otherwise be able to see. And having that relatability, like it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to feel lonely. It's okay. You know, all of us have gone through that. Like that's part of the experience of remembering ourselves.
Mm.
And to offer a safe space for those who don't know how to connect with themselves is really, really profound.
Yeah, or you start to see people uh literally defragment like a computer. Their like base file operating system is just like unpacking, and I think that a lot of that would be a lot made a lot easier if there were those kind of patterns and habits of being able to relate. And of course, I actually use the analogy of a so like a like a runaway dog turning up at somebody's door that looks really exhausted or hungry. Person takes that dog in. Initially, it would be quite easy to sort of label which one was needing help, which one was the giver and which one was the receiver. But that relationship always becomes a relationship of interrelationship, and that's not always so easy to discern. And I think that a lot of the work that I do is with people with high levels of like PTSD and sort of
Mm.
early childhood and sexual trauma, and that kind of relationship that they start to build with those places in themselves. Quite often it's like the approach of they're looking at these things like damaged unwanted dogs, and actually
Yeah.
as we start to caretake that place in ourselves and each other and become interested in it, there is this dissolution between who is the apprentice and who is the master. And it's
Mhm.
sort of that removal of hierarchy that really is the antithesis of the system, right? It's unpredictable because suddenly all of these lessons can kind of correlate. And I think it's
Right.
something that I notice within people's concepts of self, but also within spiritual traditions in general, that this kind of age of the guru is decaying like a sound wave, and there's some quite unharmonious notes that are hit along that pitch as that sound wave sort of decays. And I think that a lot of people are experiencing that in, within themselves and their own sort of power structures of self, within their own philosophies of the world, and equally that kind of that catch all of the sort of external circus that will kind of catch you if you don't have this paradoxical in a relationship. This is where people seem to get caught. It's quite interesting that a very common theme with the people that I work with is they've got massive hearts and they really care. But
Mhm.
at some point, a lot of them are swept up in these kind of social movements, left or right, doesn't really make a difference. And they're really heavily invested in them. And I say, as a result of working with me, but essentially with yourself, you will become less and less interested in that. It will just not hold the same kind of value or interest that it once did. And it inevitably
Mm.
just happens. They become more and more interested in their local environment, more and more invested in their intimate relationships and what that means for them. And it's quite interesting to see how that return is something which actually starts to dissolve the franticness of their external world. I mean, imagine your situation with the dog, right? If you were unconscious or didn't want to go there, you would undoubtedly take that out in your world and it would ping at a higher kind of
Yeah.
velocity, if you like, to sort of grab your attention,
Well, it did. Like
Yeah.
I had a full-on meltdown with him when he just decided not to walk, and I was like I did the whole negotiation, the pleading, the everything, and he was just like, "Fuck you, I don't care." And I was like, and I lost it, and I'm like, what a gift! What a gift! I haven't
Mm.
I haven't experienced that in so long that this is an aspect like, and I'm not shaming myself. I'm like grateful that I saw it. I'm like, wow, I'm actually feeling this. This is so cool. And like that gift is so beautiful because yes, I did project outward, but then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm feeling that because I hadn't felt it before or in a long time, like 20 years, I hadn't felt that. And so it's like, wow, this is still in here. How cool. How cool that I get to see it. How cool that I
Well,
get to,
yeah, is a beautiful thing to actually get into each other's lanes, right? You know,
yeah,
this is what happens. You know, this conflict and this kind of symphony as two kind of orchestras sort of
yeah,
beat it out and find a rapport. There's going to be some sort of level of like learning how to jam with each other, you know. But I've really noticed that it, you know, I mean, man, when you go in public or you go to the store or whatever, you can literally feel the grid like who the fuck is this guy, you know, like, and like sometimes they like look at you as if it's like, and you know you feel like you're in the Matrix surrounded by Agent
yeah,
Smiths. You're like, what the
yeah,
fuck? Like it's kind of like quite
yeah.
freaky for people, you know. I love to dance, and I've really noticed it in dancing, you know, like people, the level and the quality of dancing is definitely decreased, but then it's kind of natural in these times of polarization because people are going to notice each other and gravitate to places where they're kind of received and they want to be. But again, this kind of this choice is inevitable, and it's definitely quite interesting. Like you know, I know you briefly touched on like Tartaria and stuff, but the resurgence and recycling of timelines is so rapid, and I really feel that in the grid work too. And the only way to kind of even get a handle on it is to be like, right, okay, feel your body, you know? And it seems to be the only way to really calibrate it and kind of allow that, perhaps that almost like a cosmic radiation to just like pass through you if it's not
Mm,
appropriate, you know, because it's not going to energize you otherwise, but actually to take the bits that really go, oh yeah, that really pissed me off, or like, oh yeah, I'm actually like quite invested in this, or this
hmm.
really annoys me, and to really sort of like feel into it in a healthy way, I think is
Yeah.
appropriate. But I call it care porn. It's like everybody's like all this caring for everything, and it's like you literally can't do that. You can't do that, and
Oh, I know.
it's so full of like a kind of false virtuosity, and it's not, it's very very not real to be able to just sort of be so decisive, decide what is right and wrong. We all know it's atrocious, but could yes, you really stand there and bear witness to it rather than through a television screen, you know? Or is this idea of you that's reacting to this, and it's obviously being kind of siphoned off into this kind of
Mm,
reality where it just keeps it in perpetuity. It's very interesting times in that sense. And it's
yeah.
also reminds me of the energy of a kind of toddler, and the same
Mm,
parallels are very much drawn from what I see when people go through that therapeutic um process of kind of this re-amalgamation of who they are in these kind of event horizon moments of healing from trauma, where it's like, and then like pops all back out like in a singularity, because they're starting to really rediscover again that they are the projector. That's always the gig, right? The gig is always emancipation. You're always trying to like emancipate yourself, emancipate the matter around you, emancipate the world, not without, oh, sorry, without an agenda, because it's like, okay, life supports life, and that's what I want to be. That's what I want to be in my influence, and that's what I want to be in this kind of beingness within me. So therefore, these closed siphon loops, whether it be genetic, behavioral, psychological, energetic, etheric, whatever it is, it's keeps things in this perpetuity of copycat energy, like a bad dream, you know, and
yeah.
you can see that it destroys trust
Yeah.
in on so many levels. And unfortunately, that kind of voice will very often get very loud before it's assimilated, right? Before it's allowed to feel welcomed back home, just as your experience with the dog. And then you've just got a dog who knows himself, like, yeah, yeah, like just guiding you through the
I
process.
know. It's so divine. Like, but like I want to speak to the like, all those distractions. Like I can't, like I'll spend, I haven't watched movies in decades, like regularly. I just can't because it's like so much distraction. I have audiobooks I haven't listened to. There's videos I could watch. I'll watch 5 minutes and I'm like, okay, I'm complete. I know the message. I don't have the capacity to look outside of myself anymore because like every time I do, it's like, you already know this. I'm like, okay. So like I'm a former historian, so that innate curiosity that I used to have, the obsessive compulsiveness of finding the thing, which is what you do when you have a PhD in history, you have to find the thing. So
Yeah,
like
right. Yeah.
pulling that back to innocent curiosity and knowing when I'm full, like feeling that no, I don't need any more information. I got it. And then going within and feeling that it's been really fascinating because I know that programming of obsessive compulsion of needing to know the answer, and there's nothing outside of me that can tell me what I know. And it's not coming from an ego place, it's because I tap into my I am presence. And if I need to know the answer, I will. And if I don't, that's okay. I don't have the need that I did, that compulsive.
Yeah. I'm really interested in how different sort of like character types or energy types kind of because that's sort of like obviously it served you for a period, but the kind of the base what I wouldn't like to see happen is, and this isn't what you're saying about yourself, is that a lot of people find themselves in that situation and they end up making a secret covenant or pact which almost divorces them from that natural curiosity and desire because it kind of gets siphoned off into something which
Yeah,
drains them. But unfortunately, it's just the thing. We need to take it back to the source and the root, right?
right,
Because
right.
that is just so powerful because was having a similar conversation with one of my sister's friend who's doing her doctorate in biology actually, and she was like, "Oh, I don't, I'm just at the edge of it. Like, I don't really understand why we have to study this significant, like this specific bivalve and understand why it does this in a lab when we already know what it does and why it does it." And I was like,
Right.
"Well, yeah, you're probably right with that, but it's trying to sort of explain that you'll probably find the utility of something." As a byproduct of following your interest
Mhm.
rather than the other way around. It's kind of like putting the cart
Yeah,
before the horse, isn't it?
yeah.
You don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
It's
So
like
it's like,
it's like the innocent curiosity. Anything, anything. I had this in a medicine journey a couple months ago. The sacred and the profane, viewed through the lens of innocent curiosity. That's it. Like there's nothing good or bad when you're in that state. Like when you don't harm anyone, of course, but like that innocent curiosity, not jaded, not with an agenda, just the innocence of curiosity. Don't blow it up. Don't do it like what is this? Because he's yelling, what is this?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, this is like that level of curiosity, and stop unless you're guided to do more, and it requires a lot of presence.
Yeah, I find that manifests quite a lot in the very formulaic and rule-based approaches that people are taking to sort of intimate relations and masculine and feminine relationships at the moment. And it's kind of yeah, I think people gravitate to polarized viewpoints
Mhm.
when they're a little bit freaked out,
Yeah.
and I think that a healthy pinch of salt can employed in all these things that we're talking about. That come on, like this is kind of a fucking crazy time to be alive. Like, yes, you probably have had a million different lives and a million different disciplines, but let's not kid ourselves. We are literally working this out on the trot as we go along. So, maybe there's something emergent, maybe there's something new, maybe there's a dissolving of a rule-based system that once was that's going to give birth. And that doesn't mean that we cancel it out. We actually just bring it to another octave of expression. And I think that that's quite hard for a lot of people. I wouldn't even say to understand, but to trust themselves that they're part of that process, and that in their intrigue, their curiosity, their stumbles, their fumbles, their mistakes, um, they're kind of creating that pattern and that ability, that kind of scaffolding, because it's not just about us, it's really what we're kind of passing on through that curiosity too, because we enable the next guy, right, or the next person to follow that too.
Yeah, because it's just this sense of grace and compassion, and whenever I have anything come through me, I've spent so many years learning this for myself, just seeing it. Oh, this is here. Hi.
Yeah, yeah,
I love you. Whatever you are, I love you. I'm not going to go into story. I'm not going to care what the story is because the story is just going to bring me into a loop. I just want to feel and just let the feeling come through. And then I don't have to like burden myself with the stories anymore. But that requires a lot of grace and a lot of,
it does require a lot of grace, but I feel talking to a more like the path of a woman is kind of it's a whole cognitive aspect of
mm,
society that is missing because there's kind of this lack of utility for elders, isn't there, within the kind
yeah.
of realm. So like there's so much that could offer because it's like it's kind of saying like what that could say to young people would be like, look, it's all pretty confusing, right? Just chill out and let's just sit for a bit and let the conditions find themselves. That's a wisdom that oh man, you would just die for when you're a young person and you're finding that
Yeah.
sense of identity, right?
Yeah.
Like to have somebody in a lived example who's gone through all these different shades of
Yeah.
expression to be like, I'm still here, you're still here, let's just sit
Mhm.
together, let's just vibe on that and just
Yeah.
help them come in, and then equally to
Yeah.
have that challenge of holding
Mhm.
for the elder as well, and to have that reciprocal kind of harmonica, up and down the scale is something which I think, I really, really hold a flame to
Mm.
for our times, because I think it's just going to be so necessary moving into new paradigms. And I think one of the things that drive me up with traditional academia was just the culture of inflexibility and lack of reflection. And when you actually start to learn that that was never inherently part of that world, just as that rigidity was never inherently part of the scientific method either, you go, well, like, yeah, man, this is a cult. Like, this is something which is like quite crazy.
Oh yeah, like
You're just
I was
protecting what you know.
I was studying theories as opposed to like studying the dynamic things. So like nobody in my department knew what the hell I was doing.
Mm,
They're like, theories? Why would you study theories? I'm like, because it's fun. It's curious. I want to see what happens when this gets. And I mean, it was such a foreign concept because I really was actually studying what causes separation. Like that was what my subconscious was telling me. Like, how does separation create it? How does this work? I want to figure this out. And that was really the drive for getting for what I studied. And of course, I couldn't figure it out because it's much deeper than constructs. But it's it's a deep the programs. Like I see the programs. I know the only reason I wasn't programmed is because my parents taught me critical thinking.
yes, likewise. Yeah, yeah.
And they just were academics, so they were like, we want you to at least get a bachelor's or a master's degree, and I got all three of them. Life journey. I'm grateful for it. But like I love that discernment. I love that awareness because I was awake since I was little. like you. Like I always knew there was more than this. And then the programs came in and I had to remember that there is so much more than what we think. But at the same time, like the deeper we go into the spirituality, the more we realize it really is just presence and like being in the experience and that that love of learning and curiosity and beingness that you do not get trained in school.
No, you don't. But there's gateways and pathways in that same conversation I was telling you. My sister's friend
Yeah.
was talking about hereditary and consciousness and all these different things, and she was like, "Oh, can you give me an example?" And I was like, "Oh, well, mitochondrial DNA, passed down your maternal line," and it's just like it's so interesting to see people because it's. I mean, I always love people coming from different languages because I think that that's just I just learned so much from that, and there seems to be an explosion of these thoughts and of these ideas and of these concepts, and it's really delightful, as you say, to take a word from yourself to me to just be able to see this kind of mycelial network of people just really kind of becoming emergent. But on the other hand, as we all know, on a bad day, when you're kind of jilted and jaded, you kind of like it feels like you're stubbing your toe over and over and over again, like parking your car or going to the council or,
Mhm.
whatever it might be within your local bureaucracy. It's a bit like, well, this is trippy, like how have we done this to ourselves? How have we settled to this? And when
Yeah.
sometimes there can be a bit of naivety when you're talking to somebody or you reveal yourself and you get that kind of snap back. That still happens every now and again, when you really see that blunt edge and the violence of that code trying to protect itself in whatever kind of act of division or separation that you're kind of talking about. It is a real force, it's not all just kind of rainbows and lollipops.
Nice.
Really yeah, right. And there's a kind of, I think that's something that I'm always aware of in grid work is this real kind of, it always feels like this sensation of like, whoom, and a kind of palpable connection to others, almost like you're stood in a kind of corridor of time. It's not just about doing the grid work now. You always get like a resonant sense of there's kind of like this party throughout time, all playing their kind of fractal part within that map. And the most brilliant thing is that doesn't even sound alarming or crazy to say. It just feels completely real. And it's obviously very, very nice. And anybody that listening, this is really what it's about. It's really nice to be in an environment. It's just nice, it's pleasant to be in an environment where that doesn't feel like something that you have to put through a filter. And I guess one takeaway I'd like to give people in that is that that isn't just conceptual. That is on a heart level, an auric level, and a cellular and biological level that it makes you robust. It makes you robust to feel that kind of coming out and coming off yourself.
Yeah. To be able to be authentic in how we express is it's like such a gift to offer one another and it's like such a thing that like you tiptoe into and see if it's okay, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
are
yeah.
you not, I remember like 10 years ago I was in Maine and I was just beginning to study quantum physics. And one of my girlfriends was like, "What are you talking about spirituality?" She was like in my face and I'm like, "Oh, you want to go there? Let's talk about quantum physics." She's like, "I hate quantum physics." I'm like, "Well, that's what it is. Like it's the
Hmm.
scientific language for what I'm talking about." And she was like, "I can't." And I'm like, "Interesting," because like I'm just being me and I don't really care if y'all think I'm strange because I'm love. And if you don't like the language I'm using, sorry, I'm trying to adapt to what you can understand, but I'm not going to dim my light because this is, you know what I mean? It's an interesting dance when when that aspect of you that is the divine comes through and it's like Yeah, we're not gonna dim ourselves. And the authenticity that comes through, it's amazing when you're in an environment where that's not normal, being authentic,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
how that shows up.
Yeah, and you kind of really earn your stripes in some of those early experiences because people will they'll try and find a chink in your armor, and it's always good to just try and remain calm and reflect and sort of do your best in those things. But equally, it's a pain in the ass. Like there's no two ways about it. Like it just is, like it would be,
Oh,
and I'm, I would say I feel very blessed, but that's not to throw away the kind of intentionality about how my life is organized and how I live my life. I'm not
mm,
naive to think that that isn't abreast all sorts of systems that I would like to change and that probably most definitely are unfair.
yeah,
However, I don't really have to interact with anybody like that on any sort of daily, weekly, or even monthly basis.
yeah,
And I think people kind of look at your life sometimes. They're a bit kind of, a bit dumbfounded as to like how do you get to do that, or how do you get to do that unpredictable thing? Like who
right.
gave you permission? I remember when COVID happened here, and it was like in the first couple of weeks when it was locked down, and like me, the wife, and the children did absolutely nothing differently, obviously. And we were on the beach, and where we live in Exmouth, there's a beach, and like we were playing in the sea, and there was like people weren't going in the sea, and I remember it was such a beautiful day, and there was this boy who was probably about 6 or 7. It was like a silhouette against the backdrop of the sky. He's being pulled up, kind of like almost nervously by his parents away from us up the ramp. And I could see him looking at us like I would almost as if it was like an image for him, like, well, they're fine, like as I could trust that young lad would definitely see that, like, as children do, they're like, well, that not only is that safe, that looks fun, that looks healthy,
Mhm.
that looks
Yeah,
regenerative.
yeah,
Those times were especially crazy, but it's almost like what I feel like on a really grim, overcast, grey day that seem to become more common at times at the moment for all sorts of reasons, that it really shows who has sunshine within them. That's the way that I think about it. And you can really see that because people often become quite bitty when there's that lack of ambient charge because they're really not connected to that kind of solar eminence within them, and that's kind of this constant parry and joust that they're having with these different constructs that are fading away. And I think where once upon a time maybe I thought that that had to be something that had to be conquered and therefore completed. Actually, it's really having fun in that parry and joust and learning that that's part of the experience, right?
yeah,
I think all of these things can be dissolved. Those extremities of the sort of sin and sine wave can be dissolved when you kind of just get into it, riding the wave in that sense.
yeah. I love that you brought that in because I had an experience. I lived down in Weed, California, which is right outside of Shasta, when I moved when COVID hit because like that was what my soul told me. We didn't stop. We had parties. We didn't wear masks. Like we were just like acting like normal people.
Mm.
About 2 years into it, I was guided to go up to Orcas Island in Washington State. 90% of the island had been vaccinated. They wore masks all the time, and they'd just come out of 2 years of PTSD when I showed up.
Yes.
So I'm walking around sniffing flowers. I'm like I'm just being, the normal being I've been all along. And they're looking at me like, she's insane. Oh my God, don't talk to her. She's crazy. And I'm like, interesting. And I was invited to a church and I tried to shake people's hands and they're like, get away from me, witch. And I'm like, huh, interesting. Because there was so much fear and it was palpable levels of fear. And I'm like, huh, like I'm not taking any of that on, but wow. Like the trauma of being scared of your neighbors. Like that's a deep level that is being carried in DNA, right? It's I don't think it is what it was 2 years ago, but like it's there. Like there's a lack of trust and that deep level of wound healing of I had to be scared of my neighbors. I had to be scared of living.
I think, I find this. So obviously working also with people with addiction recovery and
Mm,
PTSD and trauma recovery is very similar. Like nobody talks about the post period. So
yeah.
everyone talks about, getting over addiction or getting over trauma, and that's great. It's kind of like fanfare. But that post period where the identity then takes on another form of like what am I but what I want to do and what's next.
Mm,
It can be quite disorientating for people as they start to really realize that the society, maybe the family network, maybe the relationship that they got sober for or healed for, their kind of own personal emancipation is somehow inconvenient to that dynamic. And they're
yeah.
kind of walking around then sort of becoming aware that they walk amongst highly traumatized people. And that's quite self-evident. People for the most part seem to walk around with that kind of, and I mean this in every sort of, in all seriousness, they
Yeah.
walk around with a sort of rape victim consciousness, really
Yeah.
severed from
Yeah.
their self-trust of life force and
Mhm.
really severed in this sense of trust, and this, like all trauma or like all abuse, unfortunately, it's not just really anchored in the act. It's then how that cascades down and becomes inherited by the person, by the psychology, by the biology, thinking that somehow they are cut off or annexed from that kind of river of nourishment, however you would sort of define that or interact with that within your life, and that's a very kind of crazy place to be in. But I think it's kind of, you know, it's kind of a bummer, imagine like pulling yourself out of the hole and then realizing, God damn, these fuckers are stupid. Like, like, or not necessarily stupid, but I mean, in
But
some
just yeah.
instances, stupid. Yeah, just plain
Yeah.
stupid. One of the main things, especially in the refinement of the kind of wonderful thing about everything that we're talking about, is this normalization of the people that you're going to relate to and interact with. And you can really start to trust that flow, such as
Mhm.
this conversation.
Yeah.
And equally, the people that I meet in the work that I do, they are coming from all walks of life. And it's
Mm,
so interesting to see that. I really, really love that. All races, all walks of life, all economic demographics. But the one thing that I consistently say to them, look, it's not gonna do you very well to walk around with this illusion like you're like everyone else. You can actually point to the sky now and say that's magic. Not many people, they might think that, but I'm telling you, the difference is to be able to point to it and say, this is what it is. It seems to make a miraculous difference to people's lives. And it would be stupid to think that I can't do that for somebody, nor would I
right.
want to, nor would any of us want to, but it starts to change your social circles. It starts to change what you'll eat,
Yeah.
what you'll do, what you'll entertain, what movies you'll watch, all these
Mhm.
different things, and for the better, to the point where that flips and it doesn't even feel like a choice. It just feels like a
Right.
gravitation towards what is nourishing, right?
Yeah. Oh, I feel that, and it's because I see that with how I interrelate with others. I can tell who nourishes me, and I can tell who depletes me. And I love everyone, but I want to be with the ones that nourish.
Yeah, why not? Because what's the point else?
All
Like,
right.
yeah.
Well, I'm realizing that I have two four-leggeds that need to be attended to, but I want to thank you for this amazing conversation and for who you are and all the joy you bring and all the light you bring. And I just want to ask the final question, and that is, how do people find you?
Yes, if you type my name into Google, you should be able to find me in cacophony of ways. So it's Oliver James Jenkin. No S on the end of that one. So you'll head over to my website or my YouTube channel or my account on Insight Timer. There's loads of meditations that you can try on all of those. Listen, they're all kind of the same meditation, right? I'll be completely honest. No matter the subject matter, it's all just very much about putting you in a place where not only do you feel safe, but dare I say it, a little bit ballsy and a little bit cheeky to really kind of get into that feeling of you. That's the easiest way that I could put it. And I think that our conversation has been so wonderful in that it's really just about eroding those dams, taking out those breakwaters, just to allow that tide of consciousness to spread in every possible aspect of your life, body, and being.
Mm. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.